Hello, welcome back to Elite Literary Book Group. I'm Rachel Beck, and today I'm going to go over chapter 13. And in this chapter, you get an idea of who Aunt Alexandra is. And what I always ask students is to think about what it is she represents. You know, in the back of your mind, when you're analyzing the story, and you know, you're preparing yourself maybe for AP or college level, the plot becomes less important. What becomes more important is, you know, what do these characters symbolize? What's their purpose? And you always want to be thinking in the back of your mind, what is the author's purpose? Because if you do that, then your responses are going to be a lot more analytical than if you said, well, what does Aunt Alexandria do, you know, and you write down what she does. You know who she is, but do you know why she's there? And I don't mean this in terms of plot. She's there because she wants to be there. She believes that Atticus needs her and the children need her. And she kind of dismisses the care that Calpurnia has given to the kids, which Atticus later points out was probably better for them. And she's been harder on them in more ways than a mother would have. But Aunt Alexandra is not satisfied with the way the kids have turned out. So when you look at this description of Aunt Alexandra was the last of her kind. She had riverboat boarding school manners. Let any moral come along and she would uphold it. She was born in the objective case. She was an incurable gossip. When Aunt Alexandra went to school, self-doubt could not be found in any textbook, so she knew not its meaning. She was never bored, and given the slightest chance, she would exercise her royal prerogative. She would arrange, advise, caution, and warn. And what she's mostly interested in, and when I say represent, I mean something like class structure. The Finches seem to have a history of being more well-to-do type people, although there are some characters. And Atticus tells the story of, you know, this one guy who goes to jail and ended up costing the family $500, and it's a funny story. And Aunt Alexandra is upset that he would even tell this to the children. Now, it's always curious to me why anybody would get upset by saying something that's true, you know, and it shows that the truth is not as important as image and what things appear to be. And she's a very respectful, respected person in Macomb. And part of it is because she holds herself as that. Whereas Atticus is just as, if not more, you know, worthy of respect. He doesn't carry himself that way. He carries himself the same way with everyone. Whereas Aunt Alexandra feels like she does have a role to play. In fact, everyone has a role to play, and everyone should just stay in their own class. And so this, for some reason, she's the only person who seems to really get Atticus. And he finds himself even, you know, trying to appease her by talking to the kids and saying, you know you're a Finch, meaning you know you are high class kids. But it's like he can't even naturally do this because, you know, part of it he doesn't believe in just it's a very superficial idea, you know, class structure. But for her, it's something that gives her a feeling of importance. And you notice that when she talks about the community, and it's a community that has pretty much stayed small and has, generations of the same people coming, and a lot of them are related to the Finches. But if such and such drinks, well, then, their grandparents did it, so inevitably that person was going to be a drunk. If this person is bad with money, then, well, it's their parents. And you see, it's sort of a small-minded idea. Anytime you get accused, or before you even do anything, that you're going to end up like one of your parents. Like maybe your dad went to jail or something like that happened. In my case, my mom was an alcoholic and she died at 45. And I grew up with this sense that I was already, like, people were already going to predict what's going to happen to me. And I, now I'm 41, I only have a few years left. So I don't think, I'm going to die, and I haven't quite become an alcoholic, even though sometimes I have issues. But it's not fair to put someone, it's almost like discrimination, it's like making generalizations about someone, or making up stereotypes and saying inevitably this is what's going to happen to you. You are an individual. You're not your mom. You're not your dad. You may share some common traits, but for somebody to look at you and decide your fate is a really unfair thing to do. And that's kind of how people justify having a class structure. Everything depends on your conditions, your environment. And we know that in life that doesn't. And when you read British literature, you really see a class structure. Like in Jane Austen's novels, if you were poor, women actually had to come up with a dowry to get married. Now her stories are kind of like a fairy tale, because the poor girl ends up falling in love with a rich guy and they get married and everything usually turns out fine. She never comments on what happens after marriage. But it's a happy story, okay? It's not a realistic story, because people really married within their own class. And you can see that in this chapter, regardless of race, she says there is indeed a caste system in Macomb. Just sort of like there would be in another country and culture. Here we have our own little independent, free-thinking people, and we still have a caste system? Who makes these rules? Who makes the rules for society? I'm going to suggest that Aunt Alexandra does. What gives her the authority? She gives it to herself. She decides what's best for the family. She decides what's best for such and such. And how in the world would she know? We don't know. She's not, she's definitely not an Atticus, but she's there sort of as a way to add conflict in the story, because not only do the children have to fight with her, but Atticus has to fight her too. And she's, like I said, dismissive to Calpurnia, and that is one thing that Atticus has been very passionate about. The passage I read also is in Go Set a Watchman, and that's the one that is verbatim. And also when she describes her as, the sentence is word for word in the other book, she was not fat but solid. She chose protective garments that drew up her bosom to giddy heights, pinched in her waist, flared out her rear, and managed to suggest that Aunt Alexandra was once an hourglass figure. From any angle, it was formidable. So here we have, she sort of comes in as this tyrant for the children. And this is normal, because when you get to a certain age during this time, especially for Scout, your job is to become a lady. And Aunt Alexandra is, in these, according to this society, a lady. So that's all I'll say about her right now. But what also happens is that Dill runs away. He's hiding underneath their bed. They get into a fight, and then they make up, and then they see that it's Dill. And he hasn't eaten anything since the night before. And, of course, he makes up this wild story about being chained up, and is this his new father, and he escapes. Later on, he crawls in bed with Scout, and they talk, and she says, was that really true, what you said? And he said, no, it's just what happened is he just felt invisible. I mean, his mother just got remarried. They're, in the honeymoon phase. And, Dill was already treated like an unwanted child. So here he is with the new stepdad. And this wasn't as common then as it is now. But I think you can understand, Dill turns into, he is in real life, Truman Capote. And Truman Capote was gay. So she makes one comment that, by the way, I'm in chapter 14 now. He says, they ain't mean. They buy me everything I want, but it's, now you gotta go and play with it. You got a room full of things. I got you that book, so go and read it, Dill said, deepening his voice. You're not a boy. Boys get out and play baseball with other boys. They don't hang around the house worrying their folks. So you see also the gender expectation. Dill is, of course, he's going to become a writer. He loves reading. He loves making up plays, and he's very imaginative. And during this time, he's to other people a very strange kid. And, Truman Capote, if you watch in interviews later on, especially when he says that he might have had something to do with To Kill a Mockingbird, which is totally untrue. In that you could tell he's jealous of Harper Lee. Truman Capote has some issues. I mean, he's very narcissistic in a way. But what happens to a child who's been neglected? They, like the story of Narcissus, they make up in their mind, okay, if you're not going to love me, I'll just love myself. And it's a self-help mechanism. It's not meant to make them selfish and cruel, which later on sometimes they are. It's meant to protect them psychologically. And so that's what happens with Dill. And the sad thing is that he says what he's feeling. He doesn't articulate it exactly, but the feeling that he's having is of being unloved and unwanted. It just feels like I'm in their way. They want to do this, and he's lonely. He's a lonely kid. And the last, before they go to sleep, they have this conversation that says, she says, why do you reckon Boo Radley never run off? Dill sighed alongside and turned away from me. Maybe he just doesn't have anywhere to run off to. Because he's also lonely. So you kind of see the connection between the alienation that Scout feels, Dill feels, Miss Maudie feels, Tom Robinson, who's going to have it the worst. But it's all this of people, misunderstanding who you are and having certain ideas about how people should behave. And if you don't do this, then there's something wrong with you. And I think that's how she kind of talks about judgment in the book. It's not just the judgment and the prejudice that they have for black people during this time. It's what they also do to each other. So that's basically what you need to know for those chapters. And then there's about 2 more, maybe 3 more chapters. I'll probably just go over next time, and then we'll get into the case. And the court scene is definitely worth it. If you're not enjoying this book so far, just be patient. Keep going. See what happens when you see Atticus in action. I think you'll like it. All right, thanks.